Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this ISACA live learning event. Joining me today, I'm Dustin Brewer, the Senior Director of Emerging Technology and Innovation at ISACA. And I'm very pleased to announce who's joining me today is Ronke Oyemade, a consultant and also a member of our Emerging Technology Advisory Group here at ISACA. And Ronke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone.
So today I'm really excited. We've been going through this whole emerging technology series, and today we're going to be talking about blockchain, which is one of my favorite topics. And again, Ronke, thank you so much for joining us. So first thing to get us kicked off, Ronke, let's talk a little bit about what blockchain is and why is it even considered an emerging technology?
Okay, blockchain is a distributed ledger, which is decentralized. In other words, saying that it's a network of different nodes whereby transactions are being created by participants, and those transactions are kind of put together as blocks using hash functions, and those blocks are then joined together as a blockchain.
Right.
So it's been around for about 40 years. I mean, we've had different types like e-cash, e-gold, cash as well, but those ones really were not successful. And but now, based on the Bitcoin evolution, this technology has really come to be. And the reason why is that it's being repurposed and used in such a way that it is disrupting the current way of doing business. You know, by that I mean business processes and approaches to business. So it's really transforming. That's what really makes it an emerging technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the disruption is a big piece to that, right?
Yes.
It's a very strange technology, and you and I kind of talked about this earlier this morning. It's a very strange technology in that it wasn't really created by necessarily created or made popular by a specific company or an academic institution. This was something that was kind of open source, written about open source. White papers came out about it, and then all of a sudden it was being implemented, and people were kind of adopting specifically Bitcoin, right?
Yes.
And that's really what kind of brought this whole thing into fruition, because then Bitcoin started this, like you mentioned, this disruptive process in the financial industry. And it was just a very interesting kind of evolution. And now, like you mentioned, we're evolving even beyond the financial industry, which we'll get into in a little bit later on. In this, actually, let's just jump into it now. So, aside from the fintech aspects of blockchain, where else do we see this being used?
It's been used in supply chain. Actually, IBM teamed up with Walmart to create such a platform. Also, we see it being used in security exchange. For example, the Australian Stock Exchange has adopted it. And also, which we're going to talk about later, it's going to be used, and it's being thought of in other industries such as healthcare and others. But we'll talk about that later.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, and I think there are some very like inherent uses for blockchain, as it's kind of this visible open capability that also somewhat protects data from at least being changed, right?
Yes.
Now, there are some concerns with that as well. Having a data source that's immutable, once you write something into the ledger or into the blockchain, it's there. You can go back and you can append to that, and you can change that. But there are blockchain was kind of considered this technology that was coming out that was supposed to kind of solve some classic cybersecurity issues or classic audit issues, right?
Yes.
Um, However, it has its own cybersecurity issues and audit issues and risk and governance issues. So
Okay.
let's jump into that.
Um,
What do you kind of see as a security concern for
Before we go into that, let me just give you a real summary of the technology itself.
Sure. Yeah.
This technology is leverages peer-to-peer technology with crypto graphic technology, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this helps to secure transactions and keep the players or the entities on the network anonymous. And I think based on this um, having the crypto graphic technology, um, which kind of brings in the trust factor where you can validate transactions. You can actually verify that the transactions are being made by actual, you know, um, people
Right.
without even knowing who those people are because it's at the same time anonymous. I think those things, um, those aspects of it makes this technology evolving and increase the popularity of it. Now let's go to um, the issues that we might have with
Yep.
regards to this. First of all, because it's a distributed technology, that means you have different nodes around the world connected together, right? The first thing is that this network is being maintained. In other words, some people have access to modify and, input code. Now, around that, we might have issues with change management um, uh, controls, like any other system, whereby you cannot control whether malicious code is being inputted in. And that, of course, when that happens, you have hacking, and I'll talk a little bit more if we have time to talk about that. Not only
Absolutely.
that, that, as I said, it's a technology that deals with nodes. In other words, people somewhere in the world have and I'm going to keep this very simple and not too technical so that people can follow, right? So people connect to the network and they have wallets. These wallets contain their private and public keys that they use to secure the transactions that they make on this network. Well, that's an endpoint. A node is an endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Hackers could steal people's private and public keys, especially since we know that many of the people that, especially with Bitcoin, might not be that um, technically savvy and are not that cautious of security controls. Um, that's an issue that could come up. Another thing is that I've already talked about testing. The system might not be well tested. Another
Mm-hmm.
thing that happened in 2015, a hacker actually grabbed the traffic flow of about over 10 internet providers and actually diverted that and stole, did a Bitcoin, practically a Bitcoin shakedown and stole Bitcoins. So that's another issue that we have. Other ones might be, spoofing attacks as well. So as people adopt this technology and industries adopt this technology, we're going to see even many more vulnerabilities come up. So I know we're going to talk about I'll just flow into this. since this is like any other network, we need to have a good risk, IT risk um, program in place, as well as good governance, as well as effective controls around the access to make changes, access to even the system, change management, change management controls as well. So, you know, um, that's what the future holds. And another most important issue that might come up also, or is already coming up, is that there are people who actually use this technology for money laundering because of the anonymity, as well as ability to transfer funds from one end of the earth to another end of the earth,
Right.
really quick and really cheap with no regulations. This has become a concern for key world bodies and also governments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up some really good points. Last night, I actually did a talk on blockchain for our Oceania conference that we currently have going on. And one of the questions that kind of came up during my talk was, is blockchain going to make it easier to follow an audit trail and to attribute, who's transferring funds to who? And the answer is yes and no, right? Because this technology is built so that, yeah, it has somewhat of a self-auditing capability within it. But you brought up the pseudo anonymity factor in here. So while yes, we can see one entity is shifting this amount of money to another entity, the attribution of what the private and public key, the public key that somebody would see is, it's not clear as to who those people, the identity of those people, or the
Exactly.
identity of those entities, right?
Yes.
And of course, while I was giving this talk, I'm also part of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, and we have a little chat going on there. And one of the members was like, "Oh, I'm doing some blockchain forensics, and I think I found, this person's wallet and this person's wallet just by tracing their transactions, and some of that has to be depending on which government, and you brought this up too with governance, and depending on where you are in the world." Different governments have different things. China is starting to crack down very heavily on Bitcoin. Meanwhile, you have other countries that are starting to adopt cryptocurrency as real currency.
Yes.
And you kind of, it's this weird kind of power struggle between, I don't want to say power struggle between fiat currencies and cryptocurrency, but more along the lines of kind of the older way of doing things versus kind of how we see things going, right?
Yes.
The United States is also trying to come up with some legislation for this as well.
Yes.
So yeah, there's so many aspects to this technology
Exactly.
that it goes into, but you mentioned the frameworks and how you can kind of have a risk, some kind of risk framework or government's framework already kind of in place, and then also you can put these systems in that because they are most, like you mentioned, the nodes, they're still kind of standard systems, right? They're just running a really specialized piece of software on them.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, we do actually at ISACA have an ISACA guidance and framework specifically for blockchain technology, which is mapped to COBIT. It's mapped to the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's mapped to ISO 27000 series. And it's free. It's free to download. So I don't know if we can put that link in the chat somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to do it. Try to do it a little bit later on in this talk. But there are other things. There are those possibilities out there.
And I also think that ISACA has an audit program as well.
Yes. Yes, the blockchain audit program.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
Which follows very closely with the blockchain framework.
Exactly.
That ISACA has. Yeah. So you have these abilities, these capabilities to kind of I guess I've done a talk on it before where you're basically nesting frameworks within frameworks. So you
Exactly.
can be a COBITier, right? You can implement COBIT within your organization, but then for the more IT specific things, you can implement NIST cybersecurity framework within that as well.
Exactly.
Or you can, or for a blockchain system, you can nest, the ISACA blockchain framework into whatever you're currently
Yeah.
using.
And I think
Um,
that that can be driven by having a good risk IT risk assessment, whereby you actually identify the risk and do risk benefit cost, is it benefit cost analysis, and
right.
then based on that you adopt the combination of frameworks that can assist you in governing and also mitigating risk.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And so it looks like we do have a question here actually about what kind of emerging policies are coming out. So let's see. While the trust factor is present to protect sender and receiver data in this emerging technology, what emerging governance policies programs are coming to address crimes already mentioned? Email breach. So we just saw the largest crypto heist in history, right? $600 million was stolen from the Polygon network. And was eventually returned for the most part. I think I haven't been following it lately, but there were some different things going on, and how do we treat this as a society where you have different governments who are claiming different things, right? So you have some people who believe in this technology and think that it's the future. You have some people who think it's a scam. You have some people who think that who are starting to crack down on it. So what do you kind of see for the future of that as far as policy goes, and kind of how we view not just cryptocurrency but also blockchain technology in general?
Well, my opinion is that going into the future and the way in which this blockchain technology is expanding, in other words, saying the network will be expanding, I
Mhm.
think different governments are going to come up with their own regulation. But the problem is, since this technology or the network is across countries, even if you implement controls or implement regulations in your own country, those regulations probably might not have a hold in another country, right? So you will just be restricting the users of this technology within your country. So I think the most effective thing will be to have a framework that will cover blockchain regardless of whichever country it is. At least it should be like a framework that is like a guidance, and then each country could take that framework and make it more specific to their own environment. But
Absolutely. And it,
at the
go
same
ahead.
time, you don't want to have too many regulations that at the end of the day, the actual benefit of having the blockchain technology is, minimized in such a way that it doesn't make sense to, have it. But I think it's, the way things are going, it's an excellent technology, um, not just in the developed world, also in the non-developed world. I think it probably will bring a lot of benefits to people who are in places where they don't even have appropriate banking or technology or systems in place. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen this before with other technologies such as Wi-Fi or satellite, right? Where
yes,
you can go into there are different developing countries that are out there that while they might not have the copper infrastructure, they still have that. There's this new wireless technology, and they can actually create infrastructure based off of that wireless
exactly.
technology. So
exactly.
yeah, that's a really, really good point. I like that. I like that idea a lot of this being able to bring possible stability, possible, newer technologies to different areas of the world.
Yes.
And you bring up a really good point about the governance and the different, it's such a hard problem to think about implementing a worldwide blockchain network, right? And we keep defaulting to talking about finance specifically, but that's because that's kind of the biggest use case of this right now, and it's what's kind of made blockchain so popular. Um, and in the ISACA blockchain framework, we talk a little bit. We talk a little bit about local government, or local regulations and federal regulations, or wherever you're at, and kind of how to, it's more of a thought process that we want to instill in people with that, right? We want to make sure that people are paying attention to that, which is what governance is all about, of course. But it's also the cyclical thing, because as an emerging technology continues to emerge and then eventually be adopted, you're going to have policymakers who are going to need to, step in at some point to regulate, or to, for all good reasons, of course, for the most part, right?
Yeah.
But you're still going to have that. It's still got to be a cyclical process where you can't just implement something, do the governance on it, and you're done, right? You have to revisit it, and you have to
Yes.
revisit it often to make sure that you're still staying within the confines of whatever your local governments or government is saying about the particular technology.
Yeah. And I see it more like an agile type of approach, because right now we know some of the vulnerabilities, but when this technology keeps evolving and keeps expanding, of course, new risk will come into play. And therefore, this is going to be a revolving, like a revolving door,
Yes,
whereby you have policies, you have regulations that have to always be revisited. You have a control framework that needs to be revisited to ensure that the identified risk, new risk, are being mitigated appropriately. So, I mean, obviously, we cannot mitigate all the risks. So there has
right.
to be a level of risk that everyone just has to accept.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so moving into talking about the future of governance around emerging technologies, where do we see blockchain going in the next 5-10 years? What future uses do you think that we'll see for this
Okay.
technology?
I believe, and it's even already started, many companies are building products that will run on this blockchain technology. And we're going to have, like I said, in the case of Walmart and IBM, we're going to have more companies that are going to adopt this in retail. We're going to have more companies and hospitals adopting this technology. That means healthcare. We're going to have a rise in digital assets whereby people use bitcoins or whatever to um, um, create ownership of assets. Also, I think even currently, people use this technology to raise funds for new technology. In other words, saying you buy into a technology using, this cryptocurrency um, um, to do so. Also, we're going to have things like smart contracts, whereby, like in real estate, whereby you have a contract saying, um, based on a particular set of terms, um, this set of steps should be implemented, and it's automatically implemented. So, for example, in real estate, whereby you have to go through the uh, the law firm, the real estate agent, your mortgage company, and all that. There will be a way to do all this using block chain, whereby these contracts will be executed automatically without any human intervention. So
Absolutely.
I do see blockchain really expanding and being adopted in almost every industry because it cuts down on cost, it cuts down on time, it's much more effective and efficient than having humans actually do this task.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, it's this interesting evolution that we're seeing in digital spaces happening with kind of all emerging technologies, whether we're talking about cloud, AI, blockchain, IoT. They're all kind of creating this brand new ecosystem and creating within that these new kind of ideas of what worth is. What's worth the money. When we talk about cryptocurrency, what's worth money, what's worth, there's all these different ideas. And one of the questions we have here is, so without mainstream government or central banking acceptance and crypto to crypto standards and frameworks, isn't Bitcoin or equivalent coin technologies purely speculative and or worthless? Not to say that I'm guessing blockchain technologies are worthless, as they do have uses, etc. It's a good question, and it's more of a philosophical question when we start talking about worth, right? What when we talk about at least the United States, currency, it's fiat, right? It's in good faith. It's what we believe it's worth, right? Whether Bitcoin is worth anything or not, I mean, I can tell you right now, it's trading somewhere around $40,000 for a Bitcoin. So it's kind of a belief thing.
Yeah.
I'm not a financial advisor. Ronke, what do you think?
Well, I will say I look at it differently. I mean, worth, when you say something is worth, some has some worth, that means that that thing can be used to exchange for something more that has value. Okay, so for example, I want to buy a purse, and the purse is uh, like $500, and then the trader says I should pay 10 bitcoins for it, right? So that's the worth of the bitcoin. And then if I want to actually buy, whoever wants to buy the purse has to um, get the cash equivalent of uh, 10 bitcoins and use that to buy the bitcoins, which then you use to buy the purse, right? So that's where value comes in. It's just like stock exchange. You get a paper certificate saying you own some portion of a company you've never seen in your life, but that paper is worth something. So when you look at it that way, I wouldn't say, I would say it's not the Bitcoin itself, but what the Bitcoin is capable of getting that
Right.
makes
What
it
people are
worth
willing
it.
to pay.
You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
all about supply and demand, right?
That's right. Right. And it's weird because as IT practitioners who have been in this field for, a long time, we see a new technology come through and it's like all of a sudden ones and zeros are worth, billions of dollars. Really, the crypto market is market cap on that is billions. So it's hard for us to think of things in that way because we've kind of seen this evolution happen and we're like, these are just ones and zeros sitting on a hard drive somewhere, right? How can they possibly be worth anything? But here we are.
Yeah. And I want to add this, and that's why Bitcoin prices are volatile, right? Just like
Right.
stock, they go
That's
up
right.
and then they go down, and
Yep.
you can never guarantee their worth. I mean, we don't know what might happen tomorrow, but that's the same as any, stock exchange, security, or even real estate. You buy a
Right.
house, but you don't know what might happen tomorrow. I mean, the tornado might come through and your house becomes worthless, right? So
Right.
I think that's just part of life.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's nothing you can do about that, can you?
Absolutely. And I think we're just about out of time here. And as usual with any chat in blockchain technology, we end on a note of cryptocurrency. But that's kind of the state that we're currently in right now. So Ronke, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciated this talk. Really had a great time. Thank you all so much for joining Ronke and I as we had this discussion. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and everyone have a great day.